as teams evolve, and having really an established roadmap and maintaining that is really critical. And I use that as kind of because what I find is it's not that you have a roadmap that's one and done. It's that you're bringing the team together, and it needs to be a team of stakeholders. But if you have, an organization that has set their objectives, let's say you've got an objective for a calendar year, that you can turn around to let's say an agile or scrum team and let them create a bottoms up approach and roadmap to that, using that empowered team kind of concept, and empowering that team. That means that you've got product on the team, you've got, of course, engineering, QA, design, and you'll have maybe a dotted line sometimes to product marketing.
Ty Allen, founder and fractional CPO at Neso Advisors, shares his product management journey, offering insights on building adaptable roadmaps, balancing technical debt with features, and aligning product strategy with company vision, emphasizing a bottom-up approach to leadership.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Leadership Exchange. My name is Rob Osell, VP of Innovation at This.Labs. Today, I'm very excited to sit down with Ty Allen. Ty is the fractional CPO and founder at Neso Advisors. Ty, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Beautiful day here in Atlanta.
Yes, I don't know if the weather's the same down there as it is here, but we are getting sort of the introduction to fall weather.
Yes.
There will be the revenge of the hot days perhaps to come.
Exactly.
So right now, just gorgeous high 70s, at least Fahrenheit for those of you in the U.S. Just phenomenal right now.
We should go Celsius and make everybody work for
it. Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, as I introduced you, you were a fractional CPO, a product officer. So I'm just kind of curious, as we introduce ourselves, if you can kind of explain your journey with product. In other words, like, how did you first get started kind of working on products, and, what about that journey inspired you to just keep going to this point?
Stubbornness. No, I jokingly say that. No, I think kind of always lifelong kind of geek, and like, building things and problem solving, and, and I can definitely say that I shocked myself a few times when I was a kid, basically tinkering and building. And
oh, really? Shocked yourself? Okay.
Yeah, not too bad to leave a mark. It's one of those things. I remember a couple of times on that. But I went to Georgia Tech, and so when I was in school, I was actually got an internship at the Georgia Tech Alumni Association. And at the time, and this is early on kind of internet days, they had everything online. They had like the newsletter, the magazine, and all these. And I actually was introduced to the internet, the web, really kind of, what is the more modern day internet and the tools and things around it. And it was a great, experience for me to learn about how to get stuff done. And what my first kind of project that I ever did was, if you know anything about Georgia Tech or don't, but we had this little Ramblin' Wreck. It's an old Model T car. It's kind of a little toy. Back in the day, you could get the alumni magazine and cut out something, and you could order it, and it's like a little toy. And I put that online, and you could order that online. And I worked with another intern who's a software developer, and that was my first kind of introduction to product management and product development, at least kind of modern day from that perspective. And so then I basically went to a startup, and was the 17th employee at a startup, MindSpring. Not many folks probably even know that name, but we were a company that grew to $1 billion valuation, had nine, probably close to 10 million subscribers. What I thought was going to be a short, kind of stay there, turned into around a decade. And it was a great environment. It was here in Atlanta. There's a incubator called ATDC, or Advanced Technology Development Center, kind of attached to Georgia Tech. And we were in that. And so I guess a plug for that, for ATDC. So at that startup, we had great leadership. We had good funding, and like I said, we went public, and it was one of those things that we were we had great leadership in that we had clear goals, and we were empowered to do things and get things done. And we went through a whole creating our own, how do we build software, how do you build technology, and we built and did a lot of those things. And that's where I really learned the kind of the blocking and tackling of really kind of how to get things done in a technology environment. And we had a great culture and core values, and I learned more there. And there's still kind of a core nucleus of folks that are around the kind of technology scene, at least in the Southeast, that and then some, that are kind of come from that kind of era and that kind of those startups back in that time. And that was great. And that's where I got introduced to product. I did kind of fast forwarding, so I've done product in multiple industries, web hosting, kind of, infrastructure or platform as a service, marketing tech, B2B software, field services software, SaaS platforms that way. And then, so I really kind of been, as I've progressed and worked in all these different areas, it's really given me the ability to refine and learn and the discipline of product management and how that fits into the software development lifecycle of an organization and the core principles about doing that. So that's really kind of the things that I think being and been involved in a lot of industries. A lot of folks, and I've had this conversation just in the last probably month, and like, well, how do you work on something that you're not a subject matter expert in the product world? And I explained, this was a founder. I was like, you're the SME, you are the subject matter expert in this, but I understand the discipline and I can help kind of the process and how do you refine that. So what a lot of times I'm working on is how does an organization go about the process of product lifecycle management and software development, and also value creation is a very important part of what I see as the responsibility of product management, and kind of the discipline is, I would kind of go around I'm not going to kind of use I kind of sometimes would call it the flywheel, but that's been overused and we don't need to go there. But so understand your customers by doing market research, talking to them, interviews. You can do qualitative and quantitative research of doing that. What's your product strategy? You need to make sure you understand that and have it updated. And then look at also roadmap development and the importance of roadmap development and maintaining that. That's probably as important as just having a roadmap. And then what I would say, building around pricing strategy and packaging strategies around that, and that kind of depends on the type of business you're in, but and going go to market and kind of bringing all of those disciplines together, and then continually updating that and staying on top of that process is really kind of where I have seen a lot of folks do it great, some do it okay, and then some people that's where they need some help. So,
yeah, and we want to talk about all that. I think one thing that stood out from your story that I didn't know about was, you had that experience with different startups and, getting to see different companies and different products at different ages and different, parts in the, scale, certainly. I've heard this talked about a lot in the tech industry when people are talking about for developers. They say, hey, you should, have that experience working at an early stage startup and understand what it's like to just every day have to figure something out when there is no answer and there is no process and it just needs to happen. And people say, you should also put in that time at the big tech company so that you get to see what this is like at the highest scale and the most advanced, and take that. And then wherever you end up, you can take those lessons with you. Would you give similar advice to people that are aspiring product managers or product leaders? Is there unique value in thinking about product in the different sizes from an early stage startup to, say, working at a huge, massive enterprise corporation?
Yeah, I think there is. I think one thing, there's the discipline, but one size does not fit all. And I think you have to be malleable in your thinking and in your approach to things. And what you're going to do at a large organization that is going to be very different than what you do at a startup. And I kind of would go through and say, like, you could be at a large organization, but you could be working on a brand new product. And what that approach is going to be very different. That may be much more like a startup. If you treat it like a startup, I know that's kind of probably buzzy and kind of everyone wants to say that, but if you treat it that way, because sometimes your cycles, right, that you're going through should be weekly, daily, weekly, not monthly or quarterly, kind of way you kind of maintain and put things together. And then where the life cycle of, say, a product line or a service is. So if you're going to sunset it, then it's going to be different than, kind of from launching. But kind of from a career advice perspective, I think, what I have, I take a lot from those experiences, I can't say that it was one big, kind of master plan. But it did work out in a way, and you have to advocate for your career and kind of what you look for, and if you can do that, steer that, definitely I would advocate do that. Get some good mentors, get some good advice, and be open and talk to folks. I think that's one thing. I think it was a professor in school that said, just go talk to somebody, sit down, ask them for a little bit of time, and I actually wound up getting a job offer out of that one time, and I didn't take it. But nice. It was like, just kind of, you can build a lot of bridges by just having conversations like this.
Yeah, I'm going to say that's exactly why we do have conversations like this, is that it's exactly that idea that sometimes it's just great. We all walk through life getting this kind of hard-fought wisdom, and if there's anything that I've noticed, it's that people love to share that with each other. Because we've all had slightly different experiences and have accumulated slightly different wisdom. And, anytime you can get an opportunity to give a little and then get a little bit of advice that you don't have to walk the entire length of the same path, that's definitely a value add.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, listen, I mean, you do, like you said, as being a fractional CPO, you get to work with a lot of different teams, a lot of different companies on a lot of different products. So I'm sure you've seen some of the best, you've seen some in the mid, and probably some that are struggling the most. Well, it's certainly great to talk about the things that make great products great. Maybe that's a little bit more familiar to us. So I'm kind of curious, maybe what are some of the things that you've noticed amongst the teams that maybe are in that middle or on the more struggling side as it relates to how they talk about and how they are handling their product development?
I think there's some scenarios that I've seen, and I think one scenario that I've seen that, let's say it's a technology company that's, founded by a few folks, and they've gone through and they've built their platform, and they've gone through that kind of life cycle, and they've got some customers, they're having some success. They've laid that foundational kind of pour on that, what the platform looks like, and they're shifting from really a technology shop to really more of a products and services shop. And this is use SaaS as a kind of an example here, but so you've got some really solid technology engineers. The founders really know what's going on. They've got there's been growth, and the founders are having to go CEO and those type of activities and those responsibilities. Like I said, you've had some success in some sales. You have revenue coming in, which, by the way, that's important. And on the technology side, you've had an experienced team that's really kind of going. And then what I see a lot of times is like, oh yeah, we've gone out and we've hired right out of school, a product manager, and then what kind of evolves from that is that there's a loss of trust because the technology team's starting to expand. The product management team's not really caught up. They're not experienced maybe. And you really have an underinvestment in what I would say in product management. And there's loss of trust between those kind of teams. Because what's really important in, as most things in life, there needs to be a trust, especially when you're working together. And it takes a team to do a lot of things. And that may be cliche, but my experience is that you have to work, and everybody has a role and a responsibility within that kind of realm to get things done and be successful at it. And so what I find a lot of times is that an underinvestment there. And so sometimes, that from my kind of consulting practice, we'll come in and do a product assessment and look at what's going on and so a lot of times we do see that there's an underinvestment in the product world, and you've got to kind of right that ship. One thing that really I find that as teams evolve and really as you kind of evolve your business, but having really an established roadmap and maintaining that is really critical. And I use that as kind of a keystone or center point to kind of focus on, because what I find is it's not that you have a roadmap that's one and done. It's that you're bringing the team together, and it needs to be a team of stakeholders. And you have to be careful of like too many cooks in the kitchen kind of scenario where you can't make a decision.
Yeah, sure.
But if you have, an organization that has set their objectives, let's say you've got an objective for a calendar year, that you can turn around to let's say an agile or scrum team, and that works on, say the platform features, that have them say this is where we want to go. This is what we have on the kind of from an objective, and let them create a bottoms up approach and roadmap to that. That builds, and that using that empowered team kind of concept, and empowering that team. That means that you've got product on the team, you've got, of course, engineering, QA, design, and you'll have maybe a dotted line sometimes to product marketing. I think it's important to have a product marketing manager involved there that helps with go-to-market, and then helps with the communications and roles of responsibility that you've got to train a sales team. And then you also need to work with your customer success and ops teams to be able to make sure that. But having a core team that is that knows what's going on, and having them as a stakeholder, and building, because really at the end of the day, having a roadmap, yes, it's about time and having kind of mapped out, but it's also about having prioritization. So transparent prioritization. There's a lot of frameworks that are out there that you can use. I think it's probably, let's not go into all the frameworks, Moscow and Rice and all those type of, but having a transparent way to kind of update your prioritization. And what I think is very important, and it really makes good strategy and good roadmaps, is what are you not going to work on? And I think there's a concept out there that's the negative roadmap. So what are you not going to work on?
Okay.
And so maintaining that and working with that team. So,
what do you? I mean, you introduced this idea of like the bottom up sort of roadmap or a product plan and team versus the top down. Like, what is it? Is this a situation where there's a better version of each? Is bottom up always better? What is it giving you, I guess, when you get this kind of organization going?
Yeah, and I find when you have a bottoms up approach, well, just let me kind of just back up for a second. When you have a bottoms up approach, the folks that are working on it, they own it, right? They can have ownership of it. And if you have a solid team that is well oiled, they're we kind of talked about the start is like not having some pitfalls and things not really working smoothly. But if you have a team that's kind of say harmonized, and they're in sync, and they work well together, and they understand the customer, right? So you need to understand the customer, and they've got feedback loops that they're talking to them. They've got feedback loops. They've got data that shows what's working, what's not working, and they understand the space and the technology and what they're trying to solve. A lot of times, if you can say like, I need you to build a better onboarding process for this, and have them solve that and build the right tools and that solution, because they're closer to the customer, and they're closer to the technology, and they're closer to and they'll come up with the right solution. There's a lot of ways to solve problems, right, and to build things. But if that approach a lot of times will give you, and they're empowered, and there's ownership, and experimentation, and doing that. So I find that bottoms up approach, it's not a one size fits all, and it doesn't work in all situations. But that is a good way to do it. But you also can say, hey, this is, as a team, this is what we're going to try to work on the next 12 months. And when I say a roadmap, you want to have a 12-month roadmap, and typically, what you're working on the first quarter, 60, 90 days, is the fidelity is much clearer. And as you get a little further out, you lose fidelity. And sometimes on your map, you just want to put a marker down. Like, we think we're going to work on this. And that gives you at least kind of where you're going to go. And the organization knows where you're trying to go. Your salespeople know, the marketing folks know. And, but by updating that roadmap and working with the team, and it gives you the ability to really kind of tack right or left and make sure that that's the right way, and gives your team the flexibility. Because really, there may be, just think about a couple of years ago, nobody, said AI, ChatGPT comes out and then everybody's kind of pivoting and doing these things. But having a roadmap where you're updating it gives you a chance to say, tack to a certain right or left on what the market conditions may be, or you have a competitor or something. Maybe something's really working that you didn't know was going to work, and it's really got a lot, and you want to pour gas on it, and that's what you may want to reprioritize and do work on that. So, and those are some vague kind of examples, but
yeah, where does vision come into this? I mean, if we can be reductive for just a second, I think sometimes, maybe teams and products that are led by the technologists primarily maybe get a bad rap for building things that nobody actually wants except the people developing them, right? They're just their fun pet product. They just want to seek interesting problems more so than problems that deliver value or solutions that deliver value. And maybe if you have a sales led product organization, then what you're building is just a bunch of Swiss Army knives. And like, listen, if Swiss Army knives were the greatest tool ever, we wouldn't still have hammers and everything else, right? So like, at some point it feels like the process in the team, in the group, needs discipline and someone that keeps the technologists focused on the users, but also keeps the salespeople from not saying yes to absolutely everything, because the product can't be everything for everyone. Where does that come from? Is that what the product manager's role is? Is that a process thing? Is that a mentality? Where does that vision come from?
well, I was saying, what's important to also, so you need to have a product, I think a product vision or a company vision, right? What are you going to, so at that kind of highest level, like what is that vision? And does that product, you need to create a product strategy that complements and that goes after that vision. And so I think that's important to have, and you need to update it, right? So, and I think a lot of times as your vision may change a little bit as you become smarter and you learn things, market conditions, you got to update your strategy on how you're going to go about doing that. So kind of that's the kind of vision side. So I think vision is kind of, if you kind of take the discipline of product management and kind of go around all these kind of things I went through before, in the middle, you're going to have a product vision, and they are symbiotic from, what you're trying to achieve. And it's always important that your objectives are reflected kind of in that vision, or what I would say is the objectives are complementary to that vision. Ideally, you're going to have a 12-month planning cycle. That's not right for everybody, but just in general, if you got 4 or 5, kind of key objectives you're trying to get from an organizational structure, and everybody can. I remember that startup. I was like, we all knew, and I probably can recite, rock solid, TCP/IP network, and all kinds of, jargon. And I remember a lot of those 4 or 5. Objectives that we had, and everybody knew them, and we knew we were rowing in the right, everybody was rowing in the same direction. But I digress a little bit there. But I think finding, what is right for your organization and the methodology, I guess, is really kind of the way I would go about doing it is really around that transparent model, having an updated roadmap that you're continually going over, and then having the right stakeholders in the room. And you have to prioritize things, right? If you just have a bunch of features that are coming out without a strategy, it's going to show up in the product. And but I would say, one of the things I try to work on in my career, I've tried to work on, is to provide the sales and marketing team with features and themes that they can articulate to the market and to customers that are existing and new. And a good sales team and a good marketing team can take it and really make hay with it. And so working and harmonizing with those teams, not just the technology teams, really helps out. And I think that's where good product management and working with, that's why I said it's important to have your product marketing or your marketing folks, kind of in that decision-making process of building that roadmap. They have transparency, they have skin in the game, and there's a lot of ways to go about to market and sell your services. Ideally, what I would say is if you're a good innovation shop, then you should be monetizing that and selling that to your customers. And that is really worth that. That's where things really kind of, that's where you drive revenue, and that's where you're being successful from an organization,
Okay.
and have a plan for, what you're selling. And you could be an enterprise company, or you could be enterprise solution, I would say, or you could be a solution that's going to be less cookie cutter and much more kind of temple. Packaging is what I would say is a very important concept. And kind of before we move on, I would say that one thing that I find a good roadmap needs to have is tech debt. That's very important because you need to at least account for that. You need to account for also if you're building security these days, you need to do security by design and be intentional around that. And if you're, say, in healthcare, you've got to do a lot of things that are kind of focused in that area, but you need to be and you need to map it out. You need to basically account for that. And then the other thing that a lot of times from roadmaps that get left off is that you need to lay a commercial lens over that roadmap. And if you're doing a bunch of feature development, then and you have a packaging strategy, meaning, okay, you've got, I'm just going to use the example of the silver, the gold, and the platinum package. What's your monetization strategy for that innovation you're doing? Because if that's the way you're driving value and ultimately revenue, you need to be able to package that correctly into a strategy that over time, and I would say 12, 18, 24 months, that all the packages are increasing in value. And ultimately, if you're depending on your kind of space, you may be able to raise revenue, rates 3 to 5% a year if you're really good at it. So,
Some interesting things to unpack there, especially about like what's in a roadmap. I mean, I like that idea of, you got to make sure that everything's in there, everything that needs to be a part of the product, even if it's not necessarily something that the user is going to realize that they're grappling with. But then that's sort of interesting because you sort of said, putting that commercial lens on top of it. Like, do those two things conflict with each other? That idea, like, if tech debt's on my roadmap, what does it mean to put a commercial lens over that? I mean, I know that's kind of, it gets wrapped up into the product that they get sold, and I'm sure we can make an assessment on how that affects your efficiency and your ability to turn out new products. But explain a little bit about how that works. Like, how can things that aren't demonstrably or obviously commercial be put into that roadmap with that lens over top of it?
I would say that you're not going to monetize on your tech debt. you're going out and saying, hey, we just knocked out a bunch of tech debt, and that's your kind of like marketing message. That's a tough message. You need to work on. You need to work on a little bit of that. That's not really gonna. That's not going to be a successful kind of marketing pitch. We just knocked out 25 bugs, and we updated Angular. So that's not going to be a great marketing message. But I'll just kind of, one thing about tech debt. SaaS products are 20 years old. Some of them are older. And so you're carrying around tech debt. It's not sexy, right? But your house will fall down pretty quick if you don't maintain that. And so it's always better to do it a little bit over time. And I don't know if we've all, at least I've been in situations where you just got to buy down a lot of that tech debt. There's some strategies you can have from maybe taking that and moving that to another agreement, and allowing another team to focus on the innovation side. But everybody wants to work on the innovation, and it's not sexy to work on the tech debt. But I think you need to do both. But kind of going to the monetization, commercialization side of things. Typically, that's going to be around feature development, right? And so when I say monetization, is that one of the things that I work a lot and have had success with in the last, say, 15 years or so, is the concept of pricing strategy and packaging strategy, and the importance of that. And that's where you're looking and overlaying a commercial lens to your roadmap. So it's those features that you're launching. And if you do things correctly, maybe you're going to launch them in your top two packages, and then your bottom package may not include that. But over time, maybe you graduate those features down. I don't use the automotive space as kind of a proxy or for this. I used to use the roll down windows, but everybody looks at me now like, well, who has those? Everybody's got electric windows. But if you think about the cameras, right? So backup cameras, it used to be a special feature just in the top end, kind of, and over time, those features have been pushed down into kind of the base package cars, and the value has gone up. But that's a good example of a feature that you can launch, put into your kind of high-end package, get a premium for, but over time you can graduate that down and increasing the value of your, say, middle package, your gold package, and then maybe your silver package gets that over a certain period of time, raising that overall value that your customers are using, and everybody's happy with when you do those type of things.
Sure. We're coming down here pretty close to the end of our conversation, but I think one thing that's interesting about roadmaps, right, is that I've heard somebody say, and I thought this was quite interesting. They were taking a little bit of a swipe at Agile, and they said, like, nobody ever built a coherent product 2 weeks at a time. The sort of arguing for the idea of having a roadmap, being able to see a little bit further into the future than just one sprint's worth of work on your product roadmap. But at the same time, I could see people pushing back against a really long roadmap and feeling like that constrains them or stops them from pivoting. So I was kind of curious if you can kind of help people understand both the value of looking further than a sprint and having that long range vision, but at the same time, maybe why does this not, or why wouldn't this constrain a company that might feel like a startup that really feels like they need to have the flexibility to pivot if that's what they feel like they need to do?
Yeah, no, I think that is very, ding, ding, ding. I think that's a great topic, and it's one of those, agile. We're agile. Why we don't plan that out? I had that conversation in the last 12 months with a client, and my point was stay agile. That's not the point. Agile doesn't mean you don't plan, but if you're doing your planning right and your roadmaps right. So if you're a startup, maybe you're building the foundation. Maybe you need to be readjusting, and as a team, your roadmap every week. If you're just kind of launching or just starting out, and if you got a team that's really cranking out. Like you've got some, 4 or 5. You got a good designer, a good product manager. You've got a good, engineering team, and they're just cranking. And when you've got that kind of and that team is just humming, then you're crunching through that roadmap, right? And and that's a great problem to have. I wouldn't call it a problem. And so but you're adjusting, so you're stacking on what's next. But what I would say is have some vision where you're going to go. The fidelity down the road is, like I said, is not going to be that crisp, but you're going to have something. And the fact that you're going to be, let's say that and one kind of guideline I always say is have a 12-month rolling roadmap. Update it monthly or quarterly, maybe weekly if you're a startup, and adjust, right? And as you chew up a month or chew up a quarter, tack onto it, right? And put something on there that you find and readjust, because you're going to have inputs coming in, feedback loops from your customers, and you got to listen to those feedback loops where you're just not listening to your customers.
I like that.
Yeah,
I like that too. That idea that it's like just because it's a roadmap doesn't necessarily mean it has to be equivalently and deeply detailed for the entire way, right? I mean, like if you are heading down a path, you might be able to say for the next few steps, I'm going to avoid that rock, I'm going to avoid that route, and I'm going to step over that pothole, right? But like, eventually I'm going to be at that road, and then I'm going to be in that state, and then I'm going to be in that country. Like, it's good. The further out you look, I mean, I guess necessarily these things get softer, but that still doesn't mean that it isn't on the roadmap, that you don't have an idea that you're going to be in that state and not this other state.
right.
That may eventually change. And so I guess that's maybe like the freeing part for people that feel like locking in that much is that way, is that kind of knowing where you're pointed doesn't necessarily mean you have to have written it all in stone or thought through every possible contingency of the problems you're going to be solving in 11 months from now.
Yeah, or they kind of, what are you going to do in the future? At least have some concept or, thoughts of it. And, a team likes to think about like, hey, yeah, we would like to do this. Like, what do you aspirationally want to do? oh, we really like to be able to do this, but we got to knock out A and B first. And then when you get A and B knocked out, maybe C, or maybe that thing that you thought was going to be the right thing, maybe you know that maybe we don't need it. We need to maybe redo A. So it gives you the flexibility, and stay agile. That's important, but doesn't mean don't plan.
Absolutely. That's a great piece of wisdom that we can set things down on for here. But for anybody that wants to keep this conversation going, because I mean, I think this conversation and just the idea of roadmaps and this kind of approach to product development is interesting. If people want to find you online and continue the conversation, where best can they find you?
NesoAdvisors.com is a great place to find me. Also on LinkedIn, I'm pretty active there. And I think that's probably the best way you can get in touch with me.
Wonderful. Well, then that's going to be it for us today. Thank you so much to Ty for being our guest. Thanks to each of you for listening. We hope to see you all next time. As we close out, I'd just like to thank today's sponsor, This.Labs, one last time, who would like me to remind you that sometimes it's hard to bridge the gap between business objectives and tech implementation, and it can get messy. This is trusted by top names like Meta, Google, and T-Mobile, and they love helping business leaders fulfill their strategic digital initiatives. Check them out at this.co. One more time, that's THISDOT.co. All right. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.
Thanks, Rob.